Welcome back to another edition of Tech Call. Don't forget to subscribe to Tech Call, the newsletter on FreightWaves.com if you haven't already. Today we welcome Robert Fortmeyer, General Counsel at Circle Logistics. Welcome to Tech Call, Robert.
Thank you. It's great to be here, Mary.
I'm excited. We had you previously on Running on Ice. You broke down what cargo insurance is and why it's important, and we are eternally grateful for that because, get insured. Don't lose all of your money and your life savings because you didn't get insurance for a load. But before we get too far down the rabbit hole today, why don't you give us some background on you and how you got started at Circle Logistics?
Yeah. So, like you said, my name is Robert Fortmeyer. I've been at Circle for a little over 7 years now. I've had a variety of different positions. I started off in billing and done tracking, and now I'm general counsel and running a few different side operations here at Circle. So kind of done a little bit of everything while I've been here over the years.
I like it. As just about anybody in logistics, you have touched just about anything and made yourself just a little bit of everywhere. That's like kind of the you fall into everything is what I like to say in the logistics world. You just kind of find a problem and you're like, well, I guess I'm fixing this now. And I'm glad you've fallen your way. You didn't really fall your way into general counsel. You went to law school and did all of the hard things. So congratulations on that.
Thank you. Yeah. Always trying to find something to fix.
Exactly. All right. So today we're getting into, I don't want to call it spicy because it's not really, well, it is a little spicy. We're getting into the heated discussion around broker transparency. So for those who, honestly, I feel like everybody knows, but just in case, the FMCSA recently proposed a broker transparency rule at the urging of a couple different organizations. I know the owner-operators, OIDA, I butcher their actual name the whole time. I try to spell it out every time. No shade to them. It's just I'm really bad with what is it, acronyms? Is that what that is? Yeah. This is really selling me really well. Anyway, so at the urging of some organizations, they wrote to the FMCSA and said, hey, we believe there should be broker transparency. Anyone should be able to ask a broker how much they should be able to access any documents or financials on any specific load. And that happened all the way back in 2020, I believe. And then just a couple weeks ago, the FMCSA came out and said, okay, here's our proposed rule for broker transparency. Robert, do you mind breaking down what this proposed rule is and kind of what was the motivation behind it?
Yeah, so a lot of the motivation starting there came out around COVID, shortly after COVID, around that timeline where freight rates dropped significantly. A lot of smaller trucking companies kind of felt that maybe brokers were price gouging and were withholding a lot of the actual freight charges from shippers because rates were depressed $1 a mile in a lot of areas and weren't covering cost. So it kind of started there with a lot of the carriers begging the FMCSA to make it such that they could actually see rate information from the brokers like was considered. But the problem was that they weren't really able to get the rate cons from a lot of brokers due to waivers or just practical operational limitations. So the FMCSA heard them out and kind of considered it. And now 4 years later, we now have a proposed rule.
If there's one thing I love, it is the speed at which the FMCSA moves. I know that they have a lot going on. They have to work on some situations around cargo theft and fraud and all that. And then also, monitor MC numbers. They're busy. I get it. But their rulemaking speed is impeccable. No shade to them. It's just, it's a lot, it's a big ask and it's a matter of taking, even if I were in their position, I would need a lot of time to sit there and say, okay, what is as core? What are we looking for? What's our main gripe? What's our main solution? What is the answer that everybody wants? And then you have to sit there and say, okay, well, is it even feasible? Is it even something that we can ask for, or is it too much of an overreach or whatever? So basically, the way that I understand it, and Robert, please correct me if I'm wrong, as you actually speak legal, which is the fancy way of saying that you know what most of the big words are that I have to look up. But the way that I see it is that basically the FMCSA said, okay, a carrier or a shipper can ask a broker to hand over the financial documents or any other supporting documentation for any shipment that obviously is with like that touches their stuff. So like if I'm shipper A, I can't go ask for documents for shipper C. Like it has to be about my own stuff. Because otherwise that would be a whole nightmare. But basically, if I'm shipper A or carrier A, I can go ask about I can go ask for documents, financial or other, that have to do with everything for my shipment. I want to say, and it has to be provided within 72 hours. Is that did they put a quantifier of time on there?
48 hours from the time of the request. So it's not necessarily 48 hours. There's a little bit of a discrepancy. It's not necessarily 48 hours from the time the transaction was completed, but 48 hours from the request is the way it's currently written.
Okay. And I don't think there was any like limitation on like when I make the request. So if I wanted to go back and ask for a shipment from 6 months ago, I could. Is that correct?
Theoretically, yeah. I mean, I did not see anything, and I didn't see any limitation on the number of records. So theoretically, you could go in and make a whole list of, hey, I've run these 50 loads for you in this time. Can I see the information for all 50 of these?
And then once they make the request, is there's just a like I don't have to officially mail you the document. It would just be like I could just send you an email with everything, right?
Yeah, the way it's written is it has to be electronic. So one of the reasons for that change is that a number of brokers have been telling carriers or shippers, yeah, you can come inspect our records of your shipments, but you have to come to our headquarters, or you have to go to this satellite location where the data is stored, or something else to make it inconvenient. But now the proposed change would require electronic records so that it would be providable in some sort of digital format, whether it's an email or a platform, something like that.
Honestly, though, I'm kind of okay with that little stipulation, because if someone's going to the trouble of asking for all of these documents, like just give it to them. Like it's annoying, yes, but like it's not like you have to specifically be in Atlanta, Georgia on the third Tuesday of every month between 11 and 1. Like no, so I'm not mad about that part of the proposed rule. So so everything about this is as the rule is written right now. So if between now and a year or two or a month from now, when they publish the rule, which it's not going to be in a month from now, I've never seen them move that quickly. So it's honestly become a very heated debate. So obviously you're going to have drivers on one side of things and brokers on the other. So everyone's very divided. And do you think that there's a way to that if you were in the FMCSA shoes, is there a way to propose this rule that truly meets in the middle of everyone, where carriers feel like their voices are heard and that they're not getting obliterated on rates, or they don't feel like they're getting gouged on rates, but then also brokers are actually saying, no, like this is why we have to charge them. This is our cost structure. This is how it's broken down. Do you see that there's like a middle ground anywhere that keeps everybody happy? Or is it kind of somebody's always going to get mad?
I think that anytime you're dealing with other businesses, if you don't have a great relationship with the person you're dealing with, there's always a way to speculate that, you should have done better, or the other person should have done better, or what have you. Like one saying that I've always enjoyed is that comparison is the thief of all joy. And if carriers are looking at the shipment and saying, oh, you got paid this much, I only got paid this much, they're stealing their own joy. They settled on that rate and accepted it. So they, should be happy with it. The only reason they're not is because they're thinking about what someone else got. And same thing for the shippers is, they can look at it and say, oh, I should have only had to pay this much. So it's kind of, anytime you're opening this door to compare, you're going to open the door to a lot of frustration, kind of no matter how you end up settling it.
Yeah. I think I'm curious to see, after if this rule comes about or anything like that, or if it ends up being finalized as it's written, I'm curious to see the shipper aspect of it because I know that I worked at a brokerage and the invoices that we would show our shippers were not the original ones. So they had our margin on there. But our margin for each shipment was essentially like it was agreed upon, so it was like a flat rate. So if they wanted to, they could do the math to figure out how much it actually was. But that's the other thing. I'm curious to see the shipper reaction because if there starts to be a contingent of shippers of saying, well, I'm paying 15, 10, whatever percent for this 3PL or this freight brokerage to handle the shipment, well, I want it lower. But at the same time, like you're paying for that expertise. So it's kind of like if you think it's cheaper to do it yourself, well, suddenly you're paying a lot more to hire people to do those jobs and your supply chain could essentially suffer from it. And whereas that's why you pay your freight brokerage or your 3PLs, you're paying for their expertise and their knowledge. It's kind of like when you pay for a plumber to come out, like you're paying for their expertise and their knowledge, or you're paying for them to only spend 20 minutes on it versus you spending 3 days on it and inevitably flooding your basement.
Not speaking from experience.
No, not speaking from experience. I can do some light plumbing work, but when it comes to anything where you have to cut a pipe, I generally don't do that. But I can change a garbage disposal with the best of them. Anyway, do you see this proposed rule having any industries that are exempt? Because I know when ELDs first came into effect, they were a whole thing, but agriculture was exempt because they have livestock and other things like that. And then we see the hours of service waivers that come out we saw them during COVID. Do you see anything that would potentially make this exempt from this rule as it's written?
Not necessarily a specific commodity or industry, but I guess I could potentially foresee government and subcontracted shipments being excluded. If there's some sort of national security concern about the details of the shipment being shared, depending on the format, that may be a concern at some point in time that maybe that gets exempted. But otherwise, I don't necessarily foresee a lot of reason that there would be exemptions. Maybe agriculture, if the FMCSA through its findings here determines that there is a substantial cost to producing the records, maybe the agricultural industry would be exempted to help save our food supply chain costs. But I think that might be a little bit of a stretch.
Yeah, I think there's more pressing rules that are coming to the food supply chain than broker transparency. They have their own situation happening over there, and if you want to know more about it, just check out Running on Ice because we break it down. But yeah, they have their own food traceability rule situation that's coming in to, I'm not going to say ruin the day, but add a little extra cost up the supply chain. So we've kind of looked at the different aspects of it. Overall, the broker transparency rule, if it comes in as it's written now and they decide that, yes, let's go ahead and move forward with it, do you see it overall affecting operations and profitability of 3PLs? Because if everyone's able to sit there and essentially check your work, then you kind of have to, if someone can always grade your homework, like you're constantly having to like justify yourself. Do you think that's going to start eating into profits and operations?
I think that that's something that would differ based on probably a couple things. One, the nature of the type of freight in operation at each brokerage. And then second, based on the size of the brokerage, the kind of the cost of implementing this kind of structure to be able to provide the records is going to be, not necessarily burdensome, but it would be, a lot more burdensome on a smaller broker that's doing relatively low volume than it would be on, another brokerage that has a full IT department or has a robust tech stack that they're able to put something like this together with, relatively small cost. It'll be a meaningful expense, but it's, in the grand scheme, it's a smaller portion of the total revenue.
Yeah, because for example, like your large C.H. Robinsons can absorb it a lot easier because they probably already have those components. And it would just mean kind of reallocating the work of some customer service individuals to do it. Whereas a much smaller brokerage that maybe has a total of 20 employees or less, it's going to be a much bigger lift for them. And again, I feel like most people have, in some way, shape, or form, the capabilities to do it. It's just a matter of, figuring out eventually, honestly, once the rule is officially finalized, that this is a matter of figuring out what exactly people are asking for and what they're allowed to ask for, and then kind of setting up the system or tweaking some things on the IT side to be more friendly, so they can just go in and click what they need. And yeah, I'm excited. I'm not excited for that, but I'm excited for that tech aspect of it, of being able to leverage your technology and not have as heavy of a lift. So, out of curiosity, since you are general counsel, and kind of the ins and outs of how rules are made and laws and all of that, why does it take so long for the FMCSA to make a rule? Because, like we said, this was proposed in 2020. It's now 2024. And it's still in its comment period, which means once that closes in January, it's still going to be another year or so before it's finalized. If it's finalized, is this just how federal organizations make rules, or is there a reason behind it?
So, on one part, just as a kind of an orientation to it, is that the FMCSA's purpose is motor carrier safety. So, at the grand scheme, from the FMCSA's perspective, this probably isn't an issue of safety in keeping federal highways safe and keeping motor carriers safe. So this isn't, if I had to guess what the FMCSA is thinking, this isn't the highest priority because it doesn't have to do with safety. But so that's part of the reason for the slowdown. The other part is that, once they know that maybe a rule should be made or proposed, they need to go through a research period to, one, find out, does this rule even make sense for the type of thing that we are meant to regulate? And then if they find that makes sense, they also need to determine with the legal staff, is this the type of thing that we're even able to regulate? Does our congressional authority cover this type of issue? And I know there are some arguments about that, that the FMCSA's authority doesn't include requiring a broker and transparency rule. So there are some issues there, but it takes considerable time to do case studies, to do research, to conduct in-depth analysis of the costs, the benefits, and the practicality of such a rule, and then whether they can even publish the rule. And then you take that and figure that it's a back burner type of issue for them. This kind of timeline makes sense.
I did 1,000% forget that the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration, number one priority is motor carrier safety, and that this obviously is not at the leading cause of that. So yeah, that once you say it like that, it makes it pretty straightforward why it would take a while for something like this to happen. All right, so we're running out of time a little bit, but before we go, is there anything else that brokers need to know about, prepare for, or anything that they need just to kind of keep an eye on for this rule as it stands now?
As it stands now, the big concern is just making sure that when you are making your records, if this does become law, that when you're preparing your records, to make sure you protect your data, that you don't share any trade secrets, that you don't share any information that you don't want other people to know beyond what the law says you have to share. So it's just about making sure you work closely with your technical teams to protect your internal information.
I 1,000% agree. The other thing that I would bring up is that the comment period for this rule is still open. So you can go to regulations.gov, and then you can look for the FMCSA proposed rule, and you can obviously make your voice heard. It's kind of the same process as those who were around for the non-compete SEC proposed rule. So it's the same comment period for that, whether you're for it, against it. Just also when you're making your comment, please put why. Put some things behind it, not just I don't like this rule, it shouldn't happen. Give them the good, the bad, the impacts on your business, on your day-to-day as a result of this rule, whether it's for good or bad. Just really try to make it a beefy comment so that way it can get seen and it can be taken seriously. Because as of right now, as of recording this today on December, in December, there are over 1,300 comments on this rule on both varying sides. It's not heavily skewed one way or the other. So the FMCSA has got their work cut out for them on sorting through if people are against this or pro. So that's my final last ditch effort for that. So that brings us to our final question of the day, Robert. And I know we got into some heavy hitters today. This might be the hardest question you've been asked all day. If you could build a house out of any food, what would it be?
Oh, that is a tough question. I think I'm going to have to go with pretzels, not because they're my favorite food, but because they would be sturdy.
The structural stability of a pretzel.
The only problem is going to be the rain.
Well, yeah, that's gonna be a problem. But also the rain's gonna be a problem with most food. So I do have a question about your pretzels. Would you do soft pretzels or would you do like bagged of pretzels? And if you did bags of pretzels, would you do pretzel sticks or the rods or like the loopies or a combination of both? What kind of pretzel situation are we looking at here?
I already started down the structural stability route, so I'm going to have to go with the pretzel rods.
Okay.
Soft pretzels are better, but
Yes.
pretzel rods better for stability.
Would you potentially have like a soft pretzel, little smoky, like chandelier situation?
I think that's a great idea.
I think so too, because those are my favorite, like in the whole world, is the little smokies wrapped in pretzels. I can eat an ungodly amount of those, much to my stomach's disappointment.
Well, they make a good chandelier.
They do. All right, Robert, if someone has any good pretzel house floor plans for you, or if they have questions about the FMCSA broker liability rule, they just have questions for you in general, where can they find you outside the show?
A great place to reach me is rfortmeyer@circledelivers.com. That's my email, and I'm available almost 24/7. So
awesome. You guys heard it here first. Robert's DMs are open. So send him only pretzel images. I'm just kidding. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I enjoyed it.
You can find Check Called the Podcast anywhere you get your podcasts, like Apple Podcast and Spotify. Don't forget to check out all the other incredible FreightWaves shows, and don't forget to subscribe to the newsletter on freightwaves.com/checkcall. See you on the internet.